Back to today's video. Today is Thursday, October 16th, 2025, and today we are going to be talking about the New York City mayoral election. Apologies for the late upload. I actually caught myself watching the New York City mayoral election debate between Curtis Sliwa, Andrew Cuomo, and Zohran Mamdani. A very interesting mayoral debate going on between the three. But as I realized that I was set to make another video today about the election, about a poll from Fox News that they actually released in the New York City mayoral election that we haven't covered in quite some time, pretty much sets the stage for the final few weeks going into the end of the 2025 season to actually wait and see, are these numbers really going to change? And after tonight's performance from Mamdani, I haven't finished out the debate yet, but I'm sure we will get a final and conclusive result from it. Arguably, not much is going to change, at least for my initial estimations, as to what we are seeing and what we saw in tonight's debate. Now, thinking about the 2025 mayoral election here in New York City, it's an election that has started back in June after Mamdani defeated Andrew Cuomo in a shock victory in the New York City primary election amongst the Democratic Party. Fast forward to today, a lot has happened. An incumbent mayor has decided to drop out of the race but not endorse anyone in this mayoral election, and it is now a three-way race. A traditional one between a Democrat and a Republican, and a disgraced governor, Andrew Cuomo, running as an independent, as a third-party ticket here in the city of New York. And it is expected to be, as it has maintained itself for quite some time, that Mamdani maintains an advantage in this city's polling. Now, looking at the most recent data from New York City, we'll get back to the Fox News one in just a moment, because I do think it is quite interesting, is that what we are seeing, boosting out Mamdani in terms of his advantage, is that ultimately, in this city, Mamdani has maintained this lead for a very long period of time, but it is only moments like these when you find that even times the opposition to Mamdani, Fox News is a conservative news organization, still finds it showing a result exactly the opposite of what they might want to see in the city of New York. The Fox News poll was done by a Democratic firm and a Republican firm, Beacon Research and Shaw and Company Research. Oftentimes, major news organizations employ both Democratic and Republican firms to ensure that if they work together, they are constantly checking each other for bias in questioning, bias in sampling, whatever it is in the framing of the question. Is it leading? Is it not? All of these different evaluative factors that oftentimes make polls easy to discredit, right? At different periods of time, you'll find a poll that if it says, are you going to vote for X person, and they describe them in a very negative way, you're much less inclined to vote for that candidate. So oftentimes Fox News, and other news organizations do it too, get these groups together, they work together on a poll. And the reason why I bring this up is that the data from September and the data in October actually shows an improvement for Mamdani even after Eric Adams has dropped out of the race. It really is quite interesting, but it also goes to show just how expansive Mamdani's lead is in New York City. And even Fox News has to realize that. What they're looking at in the city is that based off not only registered voters, because this is the one that you actually could see Mamdani do surprisingly better, even as the polls say that he's not on track to do that much better. In reality, in 2025, in the primary, it was Mamdani who captured in huge portions of the electorate that the likely voter screen did not capture in. But the point is here that looking at the data, despite Eric Adams being out of the race, it is Mamdani, not Sliwa, not Cuomo, who has gained the most from poll to poll, looking at the preference in September of 2025 and the preference in October of 2025. And looking at where Mamdani's strongest support factor comes from, obviously very liberal voters, but thinking about young voters, voters under the age of 30, 67%. 63% of Democrats back him when just 56% did so in an extremely contentious and very negative Democratic primary. For Andrew Cuomo, his best support comes from moderates. Okay, that's not really that surprising. Independents, sure. But arguably speaking too, what you have found is that Mamdani, for a city that has Democrats outpacing Republicans by a margin of 6-1 in voter registration, it is Mamdani who clears every single metric. And here's the kicker for Andrew Cuomo. No matter how many phone calls you make to the President of the United States and the unwillingness to call out Donald Trump for a variety of different things still doesn't land him amongst the common and average graces of Trump voters in 2024. As 58% of voters who backed Donald Trump in the last election are going to Curtis Sliwa If Andrew Cuomo wants any chance of defeating Mamdani, that number needs to be closer to 70 to 80%, because there's already such a small amount of them. But if Cuomo could get over, hypothetically, all of those Trump voters and the Democratic voters that want him, maybe there could be a pathway. But right now, we just simply aren't seeing it. And thinking about enthusiasm, well, Mamdani, 75% of his supporters are enthusiastic or very enthusiastic about voting, and 89% are certain in supporting him. Just 43% of voters are enthusiastic about backing Andrew Cuomo, and it really is quite interesting. On all of these different issues, crime, cost of living, lack of housing, homelessness, whatever it is, all the issues that matter the most to voters, it is Mamdani who wins on every single point. On housing, he's up. On taxes, he's up. On crime, he's up. On economy and cost of living, he outpolls Cuomo and SKYROCKETS on every single one. And in many cases, let's say you take, the amount of support that Cuomo has, and let's say you give him the same amount of support that, Eric Adams had, the 8-9% he was polling at on economy and cost of living, still loses that one on housing, still loses that one on taxes, still losing that one on crime. He get just about even. And thinking about the way that people think about all of these candidates and Mamdani, Cuomo, and SKYROCKETS, Mamdani wins on every single one, save strong leader, and even then he's only trailing by 2 when Cuomo is behind on everything else. And on the net, Mamdani has the highest, approval rating as it stands right now. And so thinking about, and keep in mind, right, this is just average and everyday voters. There are going to be, Republicans who are saying they approve of Andrew Cuomo. At the end of the day, on the net, Mamdani holds himself in a pretty strong position out of any of the candidates. And when it comes down to actual support, what is being translated here, what Fox News is putting out, because I promise you, they wouldn't publish it unless they had to, because their data is so clear-cut that the data that they even had before, I don't think they did the poll way back when, because they didn't touch that early on in the race. But they did do a poll in September, and everyone swore, okay, Adams is getting out. Voters are becoming more realizing that their support needs to swing to whichever candidate seems viable. These are the talking points, right, that the right and even some on the left have been parroting on CNN, on Instagram, whatever it is. Really, you have found that there has been this lacking of recognition that Mamdani has always been going to be mayor. And he continues today to be more likely than not the next mayor of New York City. And even just thinking, right, about what the betting odds, right? We don't like to talk about them, and I get why people don't like to talk about them, but I do believe that they provide some value in assessing where people believe the race is going to go. They counted out Mamdani in the primary. In the general election, they're leaving nothing to chance with him, because they already know that historically he is, in fact, an overperformer. And if Fox News is saying that he's up by 21 points, hell yeah, he is up by 21 points no matter how you cut it. In fact, he's probably up by more. And for the first time of any major pollster, and Fox News has an A rating, by the way. I know, again, you're going to find that whatever headline they do and whatever reporting on it is going to have that conservative spin, but the data is the data. And the numbers they get are not off by this amount. Maybe you could say, maybe they're off by 2 points. Okay, it's well within the margin of error. You have a 3-point margin of error. Standard is 3.5%. That makes sense. But to be off by 21 points just simply isn't happening. And again, as much as, again, this is a poll that I do trust, because it does come from, yes, Fox News does good polls, and you'll find that to be the case. It is just so interesting that we find our first major poll, in fact, the first one we've seen here, that clears him over 50% in this multi-way race. At 52% amongst likely voters. And get this, when you keep into account the voters that were missed in the Democratic primary, it wasn't likely voters that were off. The likely voters actually very much did vote in the way we expected them to. It was the huge chunk, the 1 out of 4 voters that Mamdani got to turn out and vote for him that had never voted in a Democratic primary that were being missed by the polls because they weren't considered high propensity. So why in the world would they show up to vote in a primary, in an off year, in a mayoral election? It didn't make sense. If they weren't voting in 2016 in the primary or the general, weren't voting in 2020 in the primary, maybe the general, they weren't voting in 2024 in the primary, why would they be turning out? If they weren't voting in the midterms, weren't voting in previous mayoral elections, it didn't make sense. But it was Mamdani who brought those voters in. a new coalition, as he put, one that was very electable, and outperformed what the polls had said Cuomo would win by 12 to 24% on average, and yet he lost in the first round and in the final round. And looking at the general election, it is Andrew Cuomo who will lose again. And after tonight's debate, I really maintain this. I think nothing has changed. I truly mean it when I say it. I think nothing has changed. I think Mamdani maintains this advantage. And the fact remains that the best performing poll, just as ironic as it is, the best performing poll that Mamdani has in this entire race comes from Fox News. And while I personally am not shocked to see that be the case, because no matter who was polling this race, Mamdani was going to win because he is going to win. And we are 3 weeks away from the election, less than that, honestly. You know, you're talking November 5th. No, my math is off. I'm wrong. But still, you're talking about a very limited time between now and the election cycle. And just thinking, you know, bare bones, what we are going to find come election day is that there's a very real chance that Mamdani outperforms what this data is already telling us. And it's an insurmountable lead at this point. And that's the thing, too. The idea that Mamdani could be beaten has been predicated on the lie that all of the support, once candidates drop out of the race, will funnel to Andrew Cuomo. Well, in data point after data point, 50% of the voters that are backing Adams and did back Adams said they would not back anyone else in the general election. And guess what those numbers show? Even in a race without Eric Adams, sure, he polls at 2-3%, which is honestly fair. He'll be on the ballot. Cuomo support didn't go up. In fact, amongst likely voters, it went down, and it improved by just a point amongst registered voters. But Mamdani improved by 4 points and 5 points, depending on the voter screen. Fascinating. Sliwa gained 2 and 3 points. Curtis Sliwa supporters, they say 58% of them say if Sliwa was to drop out of the race, they would not back Andrew Cuomo, because why would they back the COVID governor? Realistically speaking, if you are so ideologically conservative, could you find yourself voting for Andrew Cuomo? Everyone talks about harm reduction, but not everyone acts on it. We talk about it a lot, right? We remember abandon Harris, you know, Bernie or bust. These are things that exist. And whether or not it translates into the reason why Cuomo lost to Mamdani will win, certainly not. But it makes the case all much more that you can't always count on dropping out and even an endorsement to push voters into your camp if they are so ideologically different than that of whichever nominee is being supported. It happens in the primaries. It happens in the generals. And we are seeing it happen now because I can even say this, just on a math basis, sound like Andrew Yang for a second, but seriously, on a math basis, you add together Sliwa and Cuomo, what is that number? Where does it get you? 41% to Mamdani's 49%. In the likely voter screen, what does it do? Gets you to 44% to Mamdani's 52%. It would still be an 8 to 10 point lead, an advantage that would rival that of swing seats enough to make them considered not swing anymore. Mayoral elections in New York City have always favored the Democratic Party, and Mamdani is no different. And the biggest mistake of Cuomo or anyone else besides those on Mamdani was believing that this election would be different, was believing that the most popular Democratic nominee for mayor in generations would be the one to lose this election. Because even being outspent, even being, outflanked in the primary, even with all the data leading up to that primary foretelling a dramatic loss for Mamdani, maybe in the first round, maybe in the final round, but he was going to lose no matter what, and he won. And now the data's saying, well, he's going to win, but maybe it's getting closer. They editorialize all of these things. Politico put out the article, Cuomo surges. Where? Cuomo gaining where? Because the numbers, if we were to flash back into my New York City mayoral videos from a week ago, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, 2 months ago, if not all the same, a boost, not for Cuomo and not for Sliwa, but for Mamdani. Very interesting. Final take here. The general election debate tonight changed nothing. Fox News maintains everything that we've known about this race. That Mamdani is in a very strong advantage, and that his point of victory will be felt by a very significant amount and potentially even more than we already expect. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video for you to watch, and then a playlist for my 2026 House election and analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.